you can only do so much in terms of the meaning that you bring to the world when it's just all about the jawline and the abs and the testosterone levels and the calves.
You can't hack your way to wholeness, right?
Yeah.
Where is real fulfillment found? Is it in success? Is it in money? Is it in sex or power? Is it in the simple things like family, faith, love?
That cheesy Disney-esque response of like, look at what's inside. Like that's what's really important. But it is actually true.
You go through life, make mistakes, fall, realize your character's not quite what you thought it was. And then you look at the life of Christ, the way he walks through it. He's got all this fame, all this attention. People are following him everywhere. And he just keeps demonstrating service.
First of all, I'm going to get this out of the way. I do not make the bed when I get up in the morning.
Guy's on T and he doesn't even make the bed.
That's going to be the only clip from this whole podcast. Ben does not make the bed.
My guest today is Ben Greenfield, who probably needs no introduction. He's a globally renowned biohacker and an edgy, controversial, but trusted voice in the realm of self-optimization and human performance. He's garnered international acclaim as a New York Times best-selling author, speaker, podcaster, and human performance expert, even gaining the title of America's top personal trainer. But now, after 2 decades of pioneering extreme biohacking and longevity protocols, he's confronting the personal costs of trying to attain physical perfection in his new documentary, Boundless, The Man Who Became Human. Ben Greenfield, welcome to the show.
What's up, man?
It's really good to see you. It's been a while.
It's been like a little while, like a long while.
Yeah, it's great to see you. And I was thinking back, it's probably... I was thinking back to the Neil Strauss event that we both spoke at, and I think that had to have been 12 or 13 years ago now. I've been with my wife 11 years. I wasn't with her then, so.
Wasn't that like the vegan tattooed Daniel, like pre-hunting, pre-foraging, everything?
Not vegan, but definitely the pre-hunt. Yeah, pre-wild fed for sure.
Yeah,
man.
I have selective memory. Anyways, it seems like you've come a long ways since then.
A lot's happened for me, for sure. Yeah. I would say the same thing about you, man. I just watched your new film the other day, and so I got a little bit of a sense of kind of your journey as well. And I wanted to say that it's funny how we're really different, but there's this parallel. I think that we both were very deep into Project Self, and I took it the primitive natural route, and you took it the more technological kind of biohacking route, and we both have, I think, arrived at a really similar place. But tell us a little bit about the film, because it's coming out soon.
I mean, premieres I think in LA next Friday. You obviously got one of the secret sauce early hidden links. This film kind of took me by surprise, actually, because there were people following me around with a video camera, but I was not the creative, I was not directing, I was not producing. All I knew was that behind the scenes, Caleb Applegate, the director, wanted to tell my story, and more specifically, tell my story of being, as you just alluded to, really dialed into the human optimization scene and at what many people might perceive to be the pinnacle of that world. And the realization that I was, climbing the wrong mountain, as some might say, or had my priorities, back asswards. And the kind of like the big shakeup moment in the film, not to spoiler alert this for too many people, is nearly losing, kind of paradoxically, everything that I thought I was working for, right? Like my family, my wife, my kids, my legacy, all of that was kind of slipping away as I was becoming fit and popular and making money and building the business and doing all the things, justifying to myself that I was, sending home the paycheck, out slaying the dragons. You kind of almost don't realize, and I don't know if you've experienced anything like this, Daniel, how much really simple happiness and fulfillment and this feeling of just dude, this feels so right and everything feels so good when you shift the priorities and you basically put faith and family first. And that's the story that the film tells.
If you had handed me back when I last saw you at that conference, let's say, if you had handed me a quiz and the quiz had like a multiple choice question about this, and it was like, where is real fulfillment found? Is it in success? Is it in money? Is it in sex or power? Is it in the simple things like family, faith, love? I would have selected the correct answer, but it wasn't reflected in
Yeah.
how I was living. And I had to kind of hit a rock bottom to really come to that. I was thinking this morning about how you and I come from the first generation of, now we call everybody influencers. I'm sure when you started that
Yeah.
word didn't exist. I cringe when I call myself
My
that, but it's
my
like,
favorite word. Thank you for using it.
but
It's like
we were,
that and biohacker are probably my two favorite words in the
well,
entire
hey,
language.
I got a tagline for your film. Because it's something I've said many times over the years. You can't hack your way to health, or you can't hack your
Yeah.
way to wholeness, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, we were that first generation who we had these new tools that allowed us to build careers off of our passion and interest in a way that wasn't really available before. I can say for myself, I wasn't prepared for the kind of like the fame and the quick fame and the money and the success that came from that. I didn't really have the tools to handle that. And so I think the last time we saw each other, I was really close to my rock bottom moment and eventually did kind of crash and burn a bit and have been,
Yeah.
it took me about 10 years to really, you kind of joked about with WildFed, really that was like my time in the wilderness rebuilding myself. So I say all
Yeah.
that when I watched your film, I was like, I could really relate. I felt like, oh, I see me and this guy had a different but parallel journey. And I wanted to really congratulate you on the vulnerability.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, and again, like it wasn't really a story that I'd ever planned on putting together and telling, at least at that level. I guess my approach was I wrote this book called Boundless Parenting, kind of after a lot of this happened and after I really like reconnected and doubled down with family and marriage and children. And like I took a deep dive into family branding, legacy building, forming a trust, passing on both generational wisdom and generational wealth, and packaged all of that together and put it in a book, and still, occasionally talk about that, at conferences or to friends or to families. And that was what I kind of thought was the only real work I would wind up doing when it comes to talking a little bit about this concept to people. And then, yeah, I mean, yeah, Caleb, who's also my best friend, who lives like 20 minutes from my house and runs all my companies, he surprised me with this film on my birthday. He just kept telling me I'm working on stuff behind the scenes. So my birthday was like 6 months ago, and we sat down. And one of my friends, Zach Efron, who's, he's a big Hollywood guy, he was in town, and he and me and Caleb and my sons and my wife and a couple other friends, we just like rented out a movie theater downtown to like screen it and watch it. And, you know, Zach and I both went out to dinner with Caleb afterwards, and we were like, dude, we need to do something with this. This is great. Cause
I thought you might say like, dude, no way. I'm not airing this. What are you, crazy?
No, like I thought it really surprised me. Cause I'm just like, I don't know if I'm lazy or what, but I'm just used to like rinky dink YouTube videos. Here's me on the stability ball, with my foam roller and my acupressure mat, showing you how to fix your hip flexors. And this is just like, something totally different. I mean, you saw it. And so, yeah, it was in December. We're talking in July. It was in December of 2025 that we decided, hey, we should do something with this. And so, yeah, we're bringing it on the road show to a few cities over the next few weeks, and then we'll start streaming it.
Well, I'm really impressed because, again, I sort of thought to myself, I mean, the first half of it, you could it rolls almost like a humble brag. You're like, okay, I got to learn a lot about you and your career because I didn't know all the things you had done and accomplished. And it was great to see all that, At the same time, I found myself getting almost like internally irritated because I'd spent so much time trying to optimize myself in my own ways. And it was like bringing up all of those memories for me. And it was like, oh God, I thought I would look back on all that part of my life really fondly, but now there was this like emptiness in me that I didn't know about at the time that now is real cringe when I look back on it.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden the film kind of takes a shift, which, if somebody watches the trailer, they'll understand what I'm talking about. But then it goes into sort of, how you had all that happening, but at the expense of your family, at the expense of what's really important in life. And I was just impressed that you would actually air it. I've somebody who's come out kind of with some vulnerability over the years as well. And I know it's just difficult for people to do that. How was it for your family to see that you guys were going to share this part of your story? Stuff that I guess you just never know what's going on in families. You never know what's going on
Yeah.
in couples. People don't share everything. And so you see the polished exterior. You don't always see what's going on behind the scenes. Was it
Yeah.
scary to first come out with that?
Well, first of all, our family is so tight. I mean, so tight. But when my wife and I almost got divorced, and some of that story is told in the film, we really reverted to like radical transparency and radical honesty with each other, big time, and implemented that with the whole family.
Something I've talked about over the years is how few wild foods still make it into our global marketplace. Most of us have grown up eating almost exclusively domesticated food products. There's a very unique food still harvested from the wild each year in the US, and that's the black walnut. Not those English walnuts most of us are familiar with. This is America's indigenous walnut, higher in protein than any other tree nut crop. The thing is, not many people eat it anymore. That's why we've turned it into the cleanest protein powder available anywhere in the world. Now, that might sound like a big claim, but think about it for a moment. It's a single ingredient wild protein made with nothing but hand-foraged black walnuts. Rather than the cheap, high-heat expeller press method most companies use to make their protein, we use the ultra-clean CO2 extraction method, the same process the medical cannabis industry uses. If you're looking for a truly clean protein powder that isn't dirty like whey, doesn't cramp your stomach like pea protein, or tastes rancid like hemp, check out Surthrival's award-winning black walnut protein powder. Get yours at surthrival.com.
I was thinking about this last night. So, my pastor, Doug Wilson, was talking about the relationship of teenagers with their parents, and he's like, one good metric of whether you're doing a good job connecting with your teenagers is if mom and dad are just hanging around in the bedroom at night, and if they just wander in there and want to hang out and talk with you guys and just like be with you in the evening. And my sons were off at dinner last night, and my wife and I were just like, just laying in bed, chatting, getting ready for bed. And, they got home and they wandered in and just like hung out in our room for like 20 minutes, just talking and joking. And that's the kind of family we are. Like we're really very much together. We have a big morning family party, like this huddle where we sing songs and dance and, do a big high five and hug. And I read the family the Bible and we pray together. And then in the evening, we have the same thing. Like we all meet together, and I take my sons through this father-son book club. So we have a book chat, and then, I take out the guitar and we sing a little bit, and then we all pitch in and help make dinner. And it's just a big party. And so because we're all just like so hyper connected, when this came out and the idea of like, telling our family story, both the good and the bad in public, they were pretty on board. Just because we tend to do everything together anyways. And then at the same time though, like at the time you and I are talking, barely anybody has seen the film. Like for the very first time, I guess exactly a week from now, next Friday, my family will be with me in LA on stage after the first like big crowd of people have seen the film. And yeah, I'm hoping that the, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, like the publicity, the media, the limelight, is something that just brings our family even closer together, and maybe gives my sons and my wife an even deeper sense of purpose when it comes to like sharing their story and seeing how they can help out the world. But yeah, nobody pushed back in my family, at least, as far as like, hey, let's do this. Let's put this out there.
It reminds me of, I guess I hesitate to bring him up right now because of all that's happened recently, but I had read Peter Attia's book Outlive, and the whole book reads like basically like high-end medical kind of biohacking. And then you get to the last chapter and he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a rage addict who's nearly lost my whole family and had to go away to a retreat center
Yeah.
to like learn how to, and this is actually foundationally underpinning all this stuff that I've just shared. And I just could relate to that so much. And I've seen this so many times. It's like a lot of times what drives you to success are the very problems that are, you know, simmering underneath the surface, yet there's something beautiful about it. And I wanted to say to you, and I don't say this I want to, with full respect to all your career and all you've done, but I sort of watching that film, I thought, man, some of this is going to help people much more than almost like anything. You've offered so much for decades to people about how they can optimize their life, their health, their fitness, their longevity. But at a spiritual soul level, the stuff that you're sharing in this is going to impact. I mean, there's going to be people who receive a gift greater than anything you could have given them with all your prior content. Part of that comes from the vulnerability, but I think part of that's coming to the realization that our culture is obsessed with this self project and it
Yeah.
doesn't really lead anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, and now it's gotten even worse. You know, you've seen it the past year, the whole looksmaxing movement, which I was actually thinking about this morning because it's a video turned up on my feed of some dude like breaking his jaw or whatever, so he could get
Right.
the Superman look. Jay, breaking your jaw, breaking your legs, mewing and implants and 14-year-olds on testosterone, and I thought, gosh, like. Even in my book, in Boundless, there's an entire chapter on like beauty and symmetry and the value that you might bring to society or to yourself and the confidence that produces. And I'm like, gosh, like, I think a lot of the like the early day biohackers or health optimizers, including myself, almost like fueled a little bit of this looks maxing movement, which fits in this same category of, well, that's great if you got, whatever, nice calf implants and a perfectly square jaw and a good hairline and optimized testosterone levels. But dude, do you realize like how much life is going to suck when you're 30 years old and you like can't have kids, like, right? You can't propagate your seed and have a legacy. And it's just,
Yeah.
I wish that people didn't have to go to the place where you feel the emptiness from the myopic pursuit of health and anti-aging to have this realization. And hopefully the film helps out with that a little bit. But, I think for some people, like, you just have to get to that point where you're like, gosh, I did it. I got the six pack and whatever. I did the Ironman and I did the Spartan, whatever, death race, and all the things. And I'm still searching, right? I still have that eternal hole in my soul that feels kind of empty.
Yep. Right. And to put your identity in something that ultimately has to fade, you just can't keep that level into
Right.
eternity.
Right.
So therefore it
Right.
has to fade. So if you're putting your identity in a thing that eventually rusts and corrupts and breaks down, ultimately, I mean, you're
Right.
going to find yourself feeling pretty empty at the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are like, well, it's all relative, right? So yeah, when I'm 40, I'll be broken down a little bit more when I was 30. But I can certainly be like the fittest 40-year-old out there. And when I'm 50, I'm going to be working on mental optimization and learning new skills. And when I'm 60, I'll be playing masters pickleball and whatever. Like, there will always be some kind of a metric to chase, no matter how old you are. Like some way to make yourself better and to optimize. And there's not necessarily something inherently wrong with that, but it will, like, there will be this constant threat and magnet and pull to take you away from faith, family, and relationships. And I think that pull towards optimization, even when your body does start to fall apart and you'd think all the clues would be there that, hey bro, this is not like the most important thing to be working on. I think that you can just stay on that hamster wheel, until you're 80 or dead or whatever.
Yeah, but you can also end up with, there was a moment in the film, your wife uses the word narcissism and she uses it so carefully. You can tell she's like
Yeah.
very reluctant to
Yeah.
say it, but she says it. And I've certainly heard that word out of my own wife before as well. And My wife is, I wanted to say, it sounds like seems like you have an amazing wife. And that's hard to overstate the gift, the blessing, and the importance of an incredible wife, you know? Uh, and I have a really incredible wife. And she basically, all that energy that I put into myself, she puts that energy into other people. And I've watched her do now for 10 years. I thought, man, she just does not get it, you
Yeah.
know, as I'm working on
No.
myself. 10 years into it, now I see what she's built for us, this incredible network of families and friends, all this support everywhere, just all these fun children and all these wonderful people who always are just interested in what we're doing and invested into us. And she's built all this stuff through loving other people. And I tried to build all these things through loving myself. And I don't want, obviously, for the listeners here, I'm not trying to diminish taking care of your health or your nutrition or your fitness. I mean, that's so crucial, but there's a point at which there's diminishing returns, and that energy is like better invested into other things. You quote Mark 8:36, which I really love. What does it profit a
Yeah.
man to gain the whole world if he loses his own soul? And I thought that really summed up this whole conversation really well, because I I was getting all the things. I mean, I look at these billionaire tech people and I think, man, on paper
Yeah.
you're the winner, but in reality you're actually the loser.
Oh, so much. And with the narcissistic thing, it is interesting because for guys like you and me who are public figures, there is a certain amount of self-work that you need to do. Like you need to be, foraging and maybe just like combing your hair and showering before you get on Instagram or YouTube, and like presenting a certain amount of like confidence and put togetherness to the world, that maybe people who aren't in the limelight and who haven't chosen to be a public health educator or public science educator or even influencer in a positive sense of that word have chosen. But yeah, it's super easy to take it too far when monetization and, shall we say, Maslow's hierarchy is tied to your image, right? And then it becomes super tempting, and you constantly have to question yourself. Okay, like is this intentionally helping me get my message out to the world, or am I getting to the point where I'm just like trying to present this fake perfect image and getting sucked into all of the dopaminergic responses that occur every time that you're doing self-work? Not to mention the idea that I think for many people, the self-work is a form of control, right? It's lack of trust in, what for me would be God's path for my life, and more trust based in how can I control this scenario including my body, my brain, my business, all those things that I can wake up in the morning and control. And until you release that, like it's very, very tempting to just say, all right, I got this. I'm going to optimize, and I'm even more motivated and justified to do so because, in the sector that I'm in, my income kind of depends on that optimization.
Yeah, so that's the piece that's an important piece, of course, right? That's just career stuff, so that's vital. But then I think, in addition to getting kind of hooked on the dopamine part of it, there's also the component where if you've got a fundamentally broken thing going on inside and everybody's complimenting you constantly on how smart you are and how fit you are and how like what incredible speaker you are and all the great information you bring, and you can just like let that become a giant cover story for what's festering underneath. And that's what I had going on. I had like unaddressed issues, and I had no sense of needing to address them because I was getting flattery constantly from every direction. And that I started to see when I got married, it was like, oh, sometimes my wife wants to talk about things about me that I don't like talking about. I'd rather go hear from my fans right now. You
Yep.
know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
or, maybe another way to talk about it too would be sometimes I'll see bodybuilders, they'll look amazing physically, but you talk to them and you're like, oh, not so intellectually developed. Or you'll see somebody who's got incredible emotional intelligence, but they're morbidly obese. Or you meet a scientist whose intellect is fully developed and they have no physical body, And you kind of get these different areas where somebody's really excelled. And I'm so interested in being fully well-rounded. But I think sometimes a little bit of notoriety can cover over a whole area that's atrophied that you don't, and it's so painful to go into at first that it's just like easier to avoid it until, it starts creeping into your life in a way that can't be avoided anymore.
Yeah, and I think one of the most difficult areas um to like cover up with that perceived image of, of perfection, or that projected image of perfection, is your relationships, your community, and your faith. It's like you just can't fake that stuff.
Yes.
There's no relationship filter that I know of. Someone could make a lot of money maybe. But yeah, when everything that you can project and fake and filter is dialed in, and then everything else that, kind of down to the, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, whatever's going on at home is not going well, all that other stuff just like super sucks. And I think that's where we see a lot of times in our sector, like people do implode, and sometimes we think, okay, well, whatever, they just, did a little bit too, much, whatever, like psilocybin one night, or they went over the edge with something, or they just kind of cracked. But a lot of times it's that slow erosion, and a lot of it occurs from the erosion of faith, the erosion of relationships, and the personal life that just kind of slips away. And that's certainly what happened to me. And by the grace of God, me and my family and my wife, we were able to catch it and fix things. But yeah, it's so easy to optimize, and yet have the things that are most important be falling apart in the background.
Yeah, and that's what's wild is like all in the quest to live a long time, right? So it's like, okay, so you get to live 200 years. I mean, not that you
Yeah,
could, but let's say you could. You live
yeah,
200 years, but none of it's living because you're so busy chasing and not living, right? Because, you start to see as the film goes on, it's like so nice to see you settling into your, I guess maybe we'll call it your new life, and seeing you with your family and seeing you, navigating those emotional and spiritual places the way you are now. And I know for me, again, having kind of been through a similar journey, I felt like, it just felt so good to see that in you.
yeah.
I'm curious, because that's what happened to me too. I came in with such strong mission and such strong drive and such strong faith. And then over time, I think I fell into the trap that's so classic. I mean, it's such a classic male power trap,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
And so, and I've recently been watching it. One of the things I've been watching recently is I'm watching men around me get on testosterone and destroy their lives, dude. I have to say, I,
Oh, man.
I
Yeah.
just, it's like, I don't know if it's that something like as you age and your T levels come down a bit, it allows a man to kind of come into his heart and connect spiritually a little bit more because he's not so driven to go conquer something like that. But then I'm watching guys who should be at that stage of life go back into their 20s physiologically and make decisions that you're like, how could you do that? You just destroyed your whole life, over something
Yeah.
stupid. And so I'm seeing a lot
Yeah.
of that kind of thing. And then, so that's one way, but also just when people adore you, man, you can really believe, because you hear that saying like, don't take anything personally, even the good stuff. It's
Right.
like you
Yeah.
start thinking that's all true, right? People are flattering you. They want to be around you. They want a little piece of what you have. You start buying into the story. And before you know it, yeah, things like faith, family, and relationships fall way behind. So what's your advice to like let's say a young guy he's coming up in looksmaxing. He's starting to get views. He's starting to feel that fame. People want him to come speak. Money's starting to come in for the first time in a big way. The ladies are all throwing themselves at his feet. What do you tell that guy before he gets there?
Yeah. So a couple of things. First of all, let's just get this out of the way right now. I've been on testosterone for 4 years. I think if you use it responsibly, and if you are not getting like super physiologic doses, that you can nip in the bud some of like the anger, the aggression, the out of control libido. And then I also think, as perhaps you were alluding to, if you do take, let's say, like a 45-year-old happily, married man, with a stable partnership, and you all of a sudden like make them like horny as hell, like they were when they were 18 years old due to improperly managed testosterone. Yeah, you can create a scenario that goes way beyond just, doing something that helps you recover faster from the gym, so to speak. So I think that's a nuanced discussion. I'm very careful with it, and both of my sons know, like, don't even go near anything like that when you're in any stage where your gonads are working just fine and you're pumping it out just fine yourself. You don't want to suppress your own natural production, et cetera. But I think there's a time and a place for a healthy discussion on testosterone replacement therapy where it fits. But as far as like the looks maxing scene, I mean, part of it is kind of just like that cheesy Disney-esque response of like, look at what's inside. Like that's what's really important. But it is actually true.
It seems like everywhere you turn, everyone's promoting colostrum these days. Endless claims, not just about the effects, but also the sourcing. And I get it, I've been using colostrum daily for almost 2 decades. And I've been in the colostrum industry now for 18 years. Here's what you need to know. Yes, colostrum is all that they say it is, but most of these companies aren't selling you what they tell you they are. They sell a cheap, defatted, fractionated product. They almost never sell whole colostrum, but worse, they sell it in overpriced, tiny amounts to maximize their markup and their advertising budgets. They make money, you get the industry's lowest grade product. Surthrival is different. We sell whole colostrum, never defatted or fractionated, and we sell it in bulk, like our 1 and 2 kilo sizes, because our customers, like me, are serious users. Pound for pound, we've got the very best product at the very best price. So whether you're using it for recovery, as a sophisticated protein powder, for gut health, or immunodevelopment, Surthrival has set the industry standard for colostrum for 18 years running. Find the very best at surthrival.com.
You know, but both of my sons are into fitness. They're into working out. They hit the gym. They take colostrum. They take creatine. You know, they take aminos. They are probably more into fitness than the average 18-year-old boy might be, and yet they know the order of priorities. Right? God comes first. Family comes right after that. Your relationships, your community, your friendships, and the service that we do to people in our little community of Viola on into the neighboring communities around us is number 3, and then comes health, and then comes your business. That's the priority that is, you know, exactly written in our Greenfield family constitution, in our mission statement. So I think setting up your boundaries for yourself in terms of boundaries that actually define your identity are important. I think some of that just requires education and self-work and in our book, you know, constant prayer and seeking to hear the voice of God and to be able to discern, you know, when you're spending too much time on self versus others. But I think more practically, the idea of looks maxing is very shallow. And I think the very, very first most important question I would ask is, do you want to attract and have as your primary audience and people who look up to you, the type of people who are that sold on something that shallow? Because once that goes away, if that does go away, then are those people still going to be backing you, liking you, following you, listening to you, or are they just going to move on, right? Because a shallow pursuit like that is only going to result in, you know, shallow followers and friends. And you can only do so much in terms of the meaning that you bring to the world when it's just all about the jawline and the abs and the testosterone levels and the calves. And, you know, I've personally been a little bit shocked at how rapid and popular the whole idea of looks maxing has become.
It is interesting, though, to think of it as a generational evolution from where we come out of, you know, and you just see, because you can kind of see it with music as well. You can see, it's so interesting with culture, you know, you've brought up God a few times, and it's interesting to watch what happens in, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 years of kind of taking God out of the center of a culture and then not really replacing it with anything except the idea of success, power, long
Right.
life, something like
Right.
that. And right now,
You remove something infinite, yeah, and then it's like, okay, so here's all this finite shit, and let's see if this can do the same thing. Just start throwing it all in that hole. That's a
yeah, and
never
here
ending
we are
hole.
today. Everybody wakes up every day, turns on the news to see like, is everything still even functioning anymore? Right? It's like we're in this kind of scary cultural moment because everything's so nihilistic. And that idea of putting God first, I was hoping maybe you could expand on that a little bit. I think that's such a crucial component. And it's funny. Did you grow up in a religious household, or did this come to
Yeah,
you later in life?
yeah. So my mom grew up near Detroit, Michigan, and my dad grew up in Miami. Um, my dad was not raised in a Christian house and was the son of relatively wealthy parents in Miami, got into a lot of trouble, drugs and jail time from the age of 13. And when he was 18, his brother was stabbed in the heart by a Cuban gang member during a fight that occurred during a drug deal. And that was kind of like the last thing that shook my dad up and made him really begin to reconsider his priorities in life. He wanted to get out of the big city, and so he just basically just like stuck his finger on a map, and it was on Idaho. It landed on Idaho. So he moved to Idaho with the dream of becoming a farmer. At the same time, my mom, and I can say this because I've interviewed both my parents on my podcast, and she's talked about this. She had a pretty brutal experience with sexual assault, again by a gang of a bunch of guys in a warehouse that she was working at. And similar story, that was like the final straw, and she's like, I got to get out of here. And she also moved to Idaho, where her sister lived. They met in Idaho. My dad became a Christian after being witnessed to, after someone shared the gospel with him. A guy named Jim Wilson, who's the father of a somewhat popular pastor. I mentioned him earlier, Doug Wilson. And then my mom's sister, who she moved out here to live with, was a Christian. And so basically they both became Christians. And, when they had me and my four siblings, we were all raised in a Christian house. And, that was a huge blessing, and that it probably kept me out of a lot of trouble growing up. And yet, like many young individuals, I still had a falling away, chasing all the things that I thought were more important or more cool, or what the world might have expected me to be, as opposed to God. And so, but that was certainly an environment in which I was raised, Christian environment, with an appreciation for faith and family, that I did fall away from. But I think coming back to it was all the easier because I still had instilled in me those values from an early age of knowing, like deep down inside, having that gnawing of, oh, like this isn't right because I know better. Like I know what's really important.
It's interesting in light of what we've been talking about, because as you go through life, at least as a man, my experience, build your career and then have the kind of things that we talked about happen, make mistakes, fall, realize your character's not quite what you thought it was, having to restructure everything. And then you look at the life of Christ and you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
The way he walks through it, he's got all
Yeah.
this fame, all this attention. People are following him everywhere. And he just keeps demonstrating service, right up to the night before he dies when he washes his disciples' feet. And you're like, man, I mean, be hard for me to pull my staff together and wash their feet,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's especially the night before I know I'm going to die. It's so he demonstrates this selflessness that when I was younger seemed kind of, I don't know, like wasted effort to me. I didn't quite understand, but now it's so interesting because when I've found that when I prioritize other people, when I prioritize my family, when I prioritize my relationships, I don't say this like as a hack, because it's going to sound like that, but
Yeah.
it's like the amount of goodness that comes out of that. It's
Yeah.
like if I go down to my gym and I train, I feel great after. There's a reward. But when I go serve somebody else, the rewards it's sort of like the difference between getting a gift and giving a gift. I mean, I just get so much more out of giving it. than I do out of
Yeah,
receiving
yeah.
something.
It's interesting that you say it's not a hack because like that's where I know like my mind is sometimes tempted to go. It's like, well, look at Harvard's longest running study
Yeah.
on longevity, and it turns out that just like helping other people and the amount of deep friendships that you have in your life trumps everything. And then it also turns out that you could say the same thing for a gratitude practice or for serving other people, and then you can sit down to your gratitude journal or begin to seek out volunteering opportunities in the local community or begin to serve your family. And at the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, this ought to help out the telomeres. Uh, and yes, that's a beneficial side effect. But when you shift into selfless mode and you're doing something for the pure joy of seeing someone else be helped, I think that's a pretty darn big clue to you that you've crossed that threshold of your identity not being rooted in self and what something does for your own optimization, but your identity being rooted in loving God and loving others, exactly as Jesus Christ did.
Yeah. Wow. Because there's a component of it where maybe it's like the difference between living in spirit and like the law or something, because you can do the same acts. It's like the condition of your heart that is more
Yeah.
interesting to me, right? So I could go serve people because I'm thinking about what it will do to my telomeres, or I can go serve people genuinely to see them be better off. And like the one is like religion. I go and I check all the boxes and do all the right things. That's another interesting component of the gospel that you see is this pharisaical class of people. They're doing all the things, but the condition of their heart when they do them is not right. And so Jesus spends more time with people who outwardly do not appear to be doing the right things, but the condition of their heart is different, right? It's soil that's receptive or something like that. And so
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
a component of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think the idea, in our family devotions right now, we're going through the book of Hebrews, and the idea of companionship comes up there quite a bit. And when you break that down, I know you're a etymology or entomology. I don't remember if it's studying words or eating insects, but you're one of the two.
Entomology, insects, etymology words.
And of course, companionship comes up, and it's the idea of breaking bread with others, and that actually being something that we're commanded to partake in as a part of this walk of faith and as a part of growing closer to God. And when you think about it through that lens, it actually there actually is a lot of fun that comes aside in. And I get into this a little bit in the film. You see a few clips here and there in the film. We started this practice close to the time that I really made the turnaround and really started to buckle down on faith and family, of throwing a dinner party on an average of twice a month at our home and just inviting people from all walks of life into the community and filling up the dinner table. And, a lot of times it's potluck style and people bring food, and there's usually a theme, right? Like, wear your most colorful spring colors, or, we bust out the karaoke machine, or there's a popsicle contest, or we've even gone as far as like Iron Chef, where two people show up 3 hours early and there's a mystery ingredient, and we write the check, but they're making the food for everybody. And it's super fun, but just this idea of service not necessarily even needing to be something that you begrudgingly go do, like whatever, serving in the soup kitchen in the middle of a blizzard at 4:30 a.m. It's like a lot of this stuff is fun, just like inviting people into your home. And I ride my bike around the neighborhood and stuff flyers in the mailboxes, and and then people begin to pour in, and you've got everybody from the retired Navy SEAL to the single mom to the family of 8. And it's that's something I would really encourage people to do if they just like really want to get started in a good place with the service community thing. Like, people don't care how big your house is. People don't care how big your table is. If you have a couple of rooms and some folding chairs and some card tables, like, you are good to go. And that's been really transformative for us as far as just like bringing people into our home, because that has exponential implications. Like, people leave, but friendships are formed and people are doing other things throughout the week. And I can't tell you how many new friends we've created and how many friends other people have made just as a result of coming and hanging out at a potluck dinner, a couple of times a month.
Yeah, well, I really want to echo that, because this sounds so obvious to say, but in our era, it's important. It's very easy to have virtual friendships and one day realize you don't even know anybody who lives in your neighborhood or you don't know anybody locally. And it's not the same thing as when you gather together. I mean, the energy of, it's like listening to a MP3 versus like hearing music played
Yeah.
live, right? It's a
Yeah.
completely different experience and it's a much more, it kind of washes over you in a full and complete way that you can't experience digitally. So
Yeah.
I just love that, man. So you've been having people over to the house and really building real in-person relationships with people who live in your area.
Yeah, the other thing is of course people are messy, and that's very easy to escape in a digital environment.
Yeah.
And that
Hmm.
can be everything from that email or text or Slack message, guilty as charged, that you send to someone with such an attitude or style behind it that doesn't really have any element of just like love or gratefulness or patience. It's just like, I tend to do that a lot in the digital environment because it's very easy for the digital avatar to be someone who you just like look on as like a mechanical Turk. It's just like, do this now, please. Why didn't you do this? Whereas when you're with people, in real life, IRL, flesh and blood, standing there with them, like there's a great deal of social grace that's required. There's a lot more of needing to put up with where people are in the moment with no ability to close a browser tab or escape. It's like if there's a 4-year-old over at your house for dinner and everything's messy and you're trying to, whatever, finish the salmon on the grill and they're running around like bleeding on the floor because they hit their head on the coffee table. It's like you're trying to manage people and be kind to people and feed people and take care of folks. And it's just entirely different than the digital relationship. And I mean, we could talk till we're blue in the face about digital versus in real life experiences. And I think Sherry Turkle has a great book on this. She's got a couple of good books on this. But yeah, if you're not intentionally bringing the messiness of other people into your life, you're missing out on a big part of what it means to be a human being. And you need to brace yourself for the discomfort and the work that comes with that. But man, it's so worth it.
Especially if you have a little bit of what we were talking about earlier. I know for me, and this has been one of the interesting things of, again, being married, my wife and I have different operating systems. And so I can't get out of bed and not make the bed. I just can't. I mean, maybe once in the year, but I have to make it the second I get out of bed. Because a made bed represents order to me, and I grew up in chaos that was dangerous. And so it was a way of controlling at least that little space. And then like another one for me is if I see like an empty roll of toilet paper on the dispenser, to me, that means my mom is in a depressive mode. She's not getting out of bed for 3 days,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
going to be true. And I'm going to take care of my brothers and sisters, and we're not going to have any food. You know what I mean? Whereas for my wife, it's like, it doesn't have any of that. It's just like, yeah, we'll get to changing it. And it took me a long time to understand that she wasn't wrong. It's like, that's because I have a need to control chaos and that comes out of my childhood. And so similarly, I think just to piggyback on what you were saying, when you bring people into your life, they are messy. And if you're a control freak, it just gets to a level, you got a house full of people, like you can't control that. And I think there's something like, what do they call it? Like exposure therapy, where
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
being in that space and keeping my heart open,
Yep.
it's been
Jump in
very
with
good
the
for me.
sharks.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like you just can't do
Yeah.
anything about it. Especially like I
Yeah.
know we've got a lot of Christian friends now and they have this enormous families. I mean, 5 kids,
Yeah.
6 kids, and they're just kids everywhere. You can't control any of it and you just got to release yourself to the chaos. I think you're really onto it with that. Hey, tell me a little bit about, so you've spent a career having to do these kind of things, like take me through a day in the life of Ben Greenfield. If we were going to take out all of the fitness and the biohacking and all that kind of nutrition and all those pieces, and we were going to walk through the things that you're doing in a day for your spiritual life, for your family, for all these things we've been talking about, what are the kind of practices that have really stuck for you over these years as you've been working this stuff out? And what are the things you encourage other people to do in this specific realm?
Yeah, as with many routines, there's always plasticity and growth that occurs. And if you would ask me this question 5 years ago, there would have been some differences, but a lot of the key elements are threaded through. First of all, I'm going to get this out of the way. I do not make the bed when I get up in the morning for two reasons. I get up early.
Guy's on T and he doesn't even make the bed.
I get up early. That's gonna be the only clip from this whole podcast. Ben does not make the bed. I get up early. My wife sleeps in a little bit, and no matter, dude, I could spend 20 minutes making the bed, and she will remake it. Like,
Yeah.
she's got her way of making the bed.
I knew I liked that woman.
It is this mysterious black box. That and the stovetop. Like, I can literally just like take elbow grease to the stovetop for a half hour, and she'll walk in the house and start disassembling the stovetop, clean the stovetop. So I don't clean the stovetop or make the bed. Now, so right now, what my routine looks like is, very first thing is when I get up, I put on the daily audio Bible. I love to listen to the Bible, and I will just tool around the house. That's like, so it's Old Testament, New Testament, Psalms, Proverbs. It's around 30 to 40 minutes.
Do you got a translation preference?
He bounces around. So later on, I read to the family, and I read from the English Standard Version of the Bible. But he bounces around, the guy who records this, and he'll choose a different translation, multiple days of the week. But I like his voice. I like his style. I like some of the expository stuff he does at the end. And then whenever that finishes, I go outside if it's summer or spring, or otherwise I'm in the living room and I pray. I have my personal prayers. And that's everything from Thanksgiving to petition to asking God to watch over, assist me with certain things during the day. Typically I have an annual retreat, and out of that annual retreat that's just me come certain themes that I'm focusing on for the year. So I have a poster on my wall right now, and that's really the core of my own personal daily prayers. There's 10 items on there. Prayer, kindness, contentedness, love, trust, honor, obedience, abundance, intention, and courage. And
that's
so
the poster you were talking about?
Yeah. So those are like 10 aspects of my life that I identified for 2026 that I really want to lay out to God to help me work on.
Could you go through them again for me?
Yeah. So the first is prayer. Specifically identified that while I do a good job with the calendared prayer times, constancy of prayer, like listening for God's voice throughout the day, before an email, before a chat, when I'm a little bit frustrated at a certain point during the day, like turning to God in those moments is something that I identified as something I need to do a better job of. So that's one. And then kindness and contentedness were 2 and 3. Kindness, pretty obvious there, just, back to the not treating people I interact with virtually like digital avatars. Contentedness, for me, that primarily stemmed from sexual contentedness, like recognizing that there are times that, I'm tempted to take a second glance or get a little bit too deeply involved in a one-on-one conversation while I'm, traveling and, out of what might be considered a safe element. And just constantly reminding myself every day how freaking lucky I am to have Jessa in my life, and how I would never want to do anything that would disrupt that relationship. And a big driver for that for me is just like contentedness. Dude, look at what God has given you. Like it's incredible. And yeah, just be content in that. Love, putting myself in others' shoes more often. Trusting God is in control, because I can tend to be urgent and impatient, especially in business activities, and trusting that God will allow things to happen in his time. Honor, specifically towards my parents when my father passed away, and some of that story is in the documentary. I had times where I felt ashamed or embarrassed, or felt like my dad was a little weird. There are times when I've been tempted to like lash out at my mom, or try and, she just does so many things that I don't agree with. She runs a coffee shop downtown, and, we bash heads a lot, even though we deeply love each other. But just this idea of honoring, like this entire year, every time I walk past my dad's grave, which is at the bottom of my driveway, I shout, "I love you, Dad." And, and that's like something new for me, right? Just that idea of honoring parents, both dead and alive. And then, obedience and abundance, right? Obeying God no matter what and trusting that things will work out, even when you have a huge opportunity open up, let's say on a Sunday afternoon for a great business call that's probably going to make you $100,000. That's the Sabbath. God said not to work on the Sabbath. So obey and move on no matter what. Abundance, meaning just constantly looking around the house at what I have that I don't need and giving away things a lot. Not having a spirit of, I can get into kind of like pack rat scarcity. There might be a zombie apocalypse someday mode. And, just reminding myself to not be in that mode. And then finally, intention. I, especially from a fitness standpoint, can get into the rut of putting in junk miles or just training for the sake of training. And for the longest time when I was like racing and doing Spartan and triathlons, it was very easy to be intentional with training. And now sometimes it's like, I'm just going to go into the gym and move shit around. But one thing that I really wanted to focus on this year was being consistent and having my fitness oriented around certain things, right? Like, right now it's tennis, right? Like I'm in a tennis group. It's competitive. I'm really having to work on my hip rotation, on my lateral stability, on my shoulder stability, and just making sure that I'm not engaged in activities, especially from a fitness standpoint, that are not intentionally focused on a specific goal and not just, wasting my time for vanity's sake. And then the last one, is courage. And, I don't know if you've experienced this, Daniel. I know you're a pretty adventurous guy, but as you grow older, as you grow wealthier, as you get kind of more set in your ways, it's easy to quit doing the things that used to scare you, right? That kind of make you step off the edge. And for this one, I'm in the middle of a 2-year project of writing a father-son adventure guide, right? I was jumping out of airplanes last weekend. I was, hunting hogs at midnight the weekend before. And I'm going on all these adventures with my sons to push myself outside my comfort zone because discomfort grows. And I recognize that I'd kind of gotten set in my ways the past couple of years. So just going out and doing more scary things. So that's an example of like 10 things that I kind of pray about every day that are things that I want God to work on in my life in 2026. That was a really long answer.
That's an excellent answer. I'm curious about how, so all these things you're talking about, they all take time and they take focus, and you had all the things you were focused on before. How much of the stuff that you used to do had to fall away, and or did it reorganize and kind of vertically integrate somehow? Or like, how are you balancing, also because you have a brand and a career and people do look to you for these things. So what does the integration look like of this, spiritual, relational thing with all of the biohacking stuff?
Yeah, I did quit racing. I raced in Ironman triathlon and Spartan and adventure racing for years. That was a huge time suck. Now I've got like an hour. Yeah. I spend about an hour doing actual like intense physical work. Like I'm walking while I'm talking to you. I don't really count that, but so definitely cutting out the amount of fitness building activities that I did, building a team and delegating way more, and also just building at a much slower pace. I went from having a virtual assistant and maybe 2 employees to now across all my companies, I have over 30 people. And, that obviously requires some work. And I think it begins from a brass tack standpoint with just having a really good COO who eventually becomes a CEO and manages, the hiring for you. But delegation and then not racing as much were 2 big ones. And then, just to close the loop, answering your question about, the spiritual habits, is I have that morning spiritual habit. And then at about 7 a.m., we have the family morning huddle, right? Where I lead devotions, I lead song, I lead family time, I lead discussion, and that's about 20 minutes.
You guys sing together.
And, yeah. Yep.
So important,
we sing together.
Man.
Sometimes it's just a big dance part. I mean, sometimes we will just like pump up whatever, like, I don't know, Hillsong or Bethel or something like that. And just just dance. And then, in the evening, that's another really, really big focus time for relationships and spiritual growth. So that again involves like 7 p.m. like clockwork almost every night of the week. Family dinner starts. It begins with father-son book club time. We're talking about a chapter of a book that I've taken my sons through since they were 6 years old. The book changes from month to month, but we kick things off with that. And then a song. I lead with my guitar, and then prayer time. And then during the morning family huddle, we're all talking about what we're doing for dinner and who's making what and who's bringing what to the table. And so everybody kind of pulls out whatever dish that they've made. And we have a game closet that literally is like, one of those sitcoms where you open the closet and all the boxes and stuff fall out.
Yeah.
We have a game closet. Like there's hundreds of games. We play games for usually like an hour, hour and a half every night. And then we put on more music or stand-up comedy or just something fun, and we clean the kitchen together. And then we all gather in the living room or in our bedroom, and we memorize scripture. We memorize a Bible verse every night. Right now, we're working our way through Psalm 90, which interestingly is kind of about longevity and anti-aging, and how by the strength of our years, we might live to 80. So it's a good reminder of our own mortality. And then we pray together, and then my sons go to bed. And then my wife and I also pray together after they've gone to bed. Usually that's the last thing at the very end of the day is we just fall asleep in each other's arms praying. And yeah, so those are a lot of just like the rocks that are planted throughout the day that really form the foundation of my spiritual walk and also my togetherness with my family.
And it's really beautiful to hear all that. I'm curious how in a world where people who are typically into what I've been calling Project Self, they're for a long time they would lean, I think mostly kind of like atheist and or maybe like be the word for it, like animistic or something like that.
Yeah.
And obviously we've been watching this incredible change culturally take place over the last decade and a half anyway. And I think right now it's a time where Jesus is very popular, and religion is starting to become popular again in a way that I've not seen in my lifetime, because it used to be if you 6, 7, 8 years ago, you brought this up, like you kind of get laughed out of the room in a way. So obviously I think part of it is that people have seen some darkness that they can't account for in their, typical kind of worldview. But still, that said, in a world of scientific rigor applied to the physical body, how has your audience responded to your spirit? And I'm asking this out of like kind of selfishly because I'm kind of, coming out with my own, path and Christianity now too. So how has that gone for you, and how does your audience receive it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree. People seem to be returning to some semblance of sanity and faith. And I think secularism kind of shot itself in the foot with the slow slide into silliness, and people just, I don't know, at least in America, just got fed up. They're like, no, I don't want my taxes to pay for, sex changes for illegal immigrants. I just like, that doesn't seem right. So yeah, I think that, you take secularism down its slippery slope far enough and people just kind of start to see the light, which I think is happening. On my end, I started to be a little bit more forthright in my faith when I started to go through these own changes, as far as wanting to rededicate myself to spiritual growth and to my family. I met with my pastor and I said, hey, look, I do have like this platform and I talk about health and fitness. And, should I be doing something there to help show people, kind of the emptiness of it all at the end of the day, especially in the absence of, filling that eternal hole in your soul with something that's actually infinite. And he said, well, you should just like write your testimony, just share your story. And so I was going to write like a little biography, like one of the little, 600-word testimonies and put it up somewhere in the About Ben section on the website. That turned into a book called Fit Soul. And then I wrote another book called Endure and another book called The Spiritual Disciplines Journal. I've got another one coming out called Precepts. I did Boundless Parenting. So I started to just like package a lot of this stuff up into books. The response from the audience, it's interesting. There's a lot of people on the planet, Daniel.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and it's kind of like I don't even know what the rough numbers are, but there was kind of like an insurgence of the I'm not a huge fan of this phrase, but what you might call the faith-based fitness crowd, who are like, oh, hey, we've got, we've got somebody we can turn to who we feel good about. And then there were a lot of other people who just kind of, pulled the Jesus freak card and ducked out.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, there wasn't a huge impact that I'm aware of, from a metrics number, if we want to call it that. And then B, I don't know, man. Like I can read 100 comments about how people finally got down to 15% body fat. And then I can read one comment about somebody who like really fortified their relationship with their spouse and came to know God and has 3 children who are thriving and love the Lord and their lives have completely transformed spiritually because of some, chapter from Fit Soul. That trumps everything, right? So, you could cut the audience by 90%. And if that leftover 10% is having some real deep, meaningful changes that they're experiencing, I don't think it even matters, right? The way I look about it is, if we believe that there is an eternal existence after we die, for better or worse, and that we have the opportunity by sharing the good news of Jesus Christ's death and burial and resurrection to other people, couched with the idea that you no longer have to be a slave to your sin and that you can have lasting and true freedom and happiness in Jesus Christ. And one person winds up believing in that and getting to live forever in a new heaven and new earth. That's like an eternal moment. That's like that's more important than anything you could have ever done in your life, because that goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Right. And so you can help 1,000 people get fit and help one person get to heaven. And the latter is infinitely more important.
Yeah. Why store up your treasures here on earth, man? They really do rust and they really do become moth eaten, right? So storing your treasures in heaven where they're eternal, that really makes a lot of sense to me where I'm at in my life today anyway. So beautiful to see the trajectory of your story. Really inspiring. Where are people going to see the film?
Boundlessdoc.com, like DOC, boundlessdoc.com is where all the premiere locations are, which I think right now is Austin, London, New York City, Miami, and LA. And then it will go to streaming after that.
And I'm really excited for you. I'm really excited for this phase of your journey. And I really want to just go back to what I kind of started with. I think the level of vulnerability that you're going to here is going to open the door for so many people to get vulnerable themselves. So as a role model, you're demonstrating something that isn't easy to do. And I really appreciate it because I really resonate with it. So Ben, thank you so much for your time today, man.
Thanks, man. It was super good to connect again.
Likewise.